Hey, Chandler Bolt here, and joining me today is my good friend, Dan Martell. Dan is an entrepreneur. He's an angel investor. He's a highly sought after coach in the SaaS industry, which if you don't know, stands for software as a service. He's founded and scaled and successfully exited, so sold 3 technology companies within a 10-year period. He's also the author of the upcoming book. It's called Buy Back Your Time. Dan's been a personal friend of mine for years. It's so exciting being on the sidelines here. Seeing this book about to come out. We've been talking about this book for years. And so it's just really cool to see that moment. Him and I have heli and cat snowboarded for years. I mean, so many fun experiences. This is a guy that I learn from and look up to, and just view as a great person and a great friend. And within that, so I'm at this mastermind these couple of days. It is, at the time of recording this interview, it is 7 a.m. and I am in a hotel. And I would have canceled on anyone but Dan Martell. So I'm excited for today's conversation. Dan,
Appreciate it,
great
man.
to have you.
I'm super excited. You know what I love best about your intro, Chandler, is that you explain what SaaS stands for. Because like most people just assume the rest of the world knows that it stands for software as a service. So I love that you did that. I appreciate it.
I appreciate that, man. As a C-level English student and a college dropout with ADHD, I think my superpower is taking complicated things and making them simple. And then my hope is, even in this conversation, kind of finding the things that people might not get and be the kind of the voice of the audience in the question. So I guess let's start with this. Buy Back Your Time. We're recording this a little while out from the launch. But why this book? And how does this book fit in with the business?
Yeah, I mean, the truth is the buyback principle is something I've been teaching for a decade. It's this simple philosophy that you shouldn't hire people to grow your business, but you should hire people to buy back your time as a CEO. Real simple. Like, I discovered this a long time ago. I came home one day, I was engaged, 27 years old. And my fiance at the time drops her ring on the kitchen table and just says, "I'm done." And it just got emotional and said, "I can't do this anymore." And literally just walked out of my life. So, I was that entrepreneur, like maybe some of you guys listening can relate to, that was just hustling because that was the only gear I knew. And, the challenge for me, and much, Chandler, you and I share this trait, is we're willing to do the work. We're willing to show up and put in the hours, get up at 7 a.m. and do the interview when neither of us actually have to do this anymore. We've been fortunate enough to have success to the level where if we wanted to, we could just hire people to do all the stuff we're doing today. But what we can't escape is the fact that we want to create and we want to feel fulfilled. And, we've learned that is always going to be part of the engine. So I literally went on a journey at 27 to figure out, how can I produce in this world and create in business, but at the same time, not be a horrible husband, father, friend, brother, etc. And I mean, that's been the journey. And, since then I've just been super blessed to not only figure out how to integrate the business stuff, but most importantly, even how to integrate the personal stuff. So a lot of people come to me today because they hear about my strategies around a house man, or the way I look at, building out teams and scaling companies. I run 2 8-figure companies today. I'm the CEO of both, but the truth is my executive team run both of them. And I get the pleasure of producing and creating from a place of service and fulfillment that just feels great. And honestly, Chandler, like the big thing, and I start the book with this, is just, I want people to avoid the pain line. Most people, when they get to about, 1.2 million in revenue, a dozen employees, they hit this place where growth hurts, right? And what I've discovered is entrepreneurs will not grow into pain. It's like putting a knife to their throat. They're not going to lean into it. And usually they do one of 3 things. They either sabotage their growth inadvertently, psychological hand grenades in their business. They don't even realize they're doing this. It's, things like slow response to emails, making the wrong hire. They literally can't even see these decisions. So sabotage. The other one is stall, making a conscious decision not to grow. But as you know, like, our markets don't want more from us. Our team don't want more opportunities from us. So like, your stalling is literally starting a negative decline. Or they call me because they want to sell, because it's just, the grass was supposed to be greener. This wasn't supposed to be this way. And honestly, the buyback principle is a first principle to looking at your time so that you can create more and do it in a way that as you grow the business, you'll actually have more time and quality of life and opportunity to build really cool stuff.
That's cool. And so what was for you kind of what was, I guess 2-parter, what was the why behind this book? Like, do you feel like this is more of a passion project? Do you feel like this is core and vital to the business? Is this a brand play? Like, where does this fit in all the stuff that you've got going on?
It's kind of like, because I've been coaching high level software entrepreneurs for my whole, my career up to this point. I mean, I exited my last company, Clarity, in 2014. So for the last 8 years, really, I mean, I took a couple of years off, kind of retired, and then came back as a coach. And now SaaS Academy is one of the largest coaching companies, especially for SaaS founders, but our goal is to be one of the best in the world. Buyback principle has just been a core framework within what I teach, but you couldn't buy it, get access to it. It was like, I don't have anything outside of software entrepreneurs that can actually learn from me. So when I sat down, actually, and I got to give credit to Ron Friedman, he's actually my book CEO. I kind of joke that's his title, but he called me one day about 2.5 years ago and said, like, you're one of the few YouTube channels I watch. Your stuff is like super full of like methodologies and strategy and tactics. Very few of the stuff you share I've heard before. You need a book. Like, it was kind of crazy. He was like, what would need to be true for you to write a book? And I was like, the truth is like, there's no economic reason for me to do this. Like, business is good. And I just didn't feel compelled. There wasn't anything that was like pulling on my heart. And we actually spent months just reviewing ideas that he heard me share, looking at different concepts. And finally, we both agreed like buyback principle was the one that we felt the world needed the most. And then we kind of unpacked it a lot more. And I just fell in love with it. And then essentially Ron became the driver. I partnered with him and Lucinda, his agent, and hired Lisa, our writer at the time, to work on the book proposal. And literally I used the buyback principle to write the book. Like I said, look, I don't have the time to do this. I'm busy with these other 2 companies. It would be irresponsible for me to go all in, because, writing a great book and going to market and promoting it is I've talked to a lot of people like Joey Coleman and many others, and it's like a full-time effort. And I see it because I have a whole team now supporting me. But that's where it came from. It was really like, I've always wanted to write a book, but I didn't want to write one until I felt like I actually had something to say that was unique. And that's where we're at today. So it's not I think it's a halo effect from a personal brand point of view, but definitely isn't directly aligned with software, even though 20% of the examples in the book obviously comes from software clients, but really great community to learn from, fastest growing companies in the world, technology, Silicon Valley, that kind of stuff. But yeah, that's the motivation for the book. Is I just wanted to create something that non-software entrepreneurs could, learn from me, because I didn't have anything prior to that.
That's great. Little halo effect, little Beyonce. It builds it builds the brand outside of the SaaS stuff core to your business, but then also as a core methodology that can help your customers and grow your reach. And massive YouTube channel. So guys, check out the YouTube channel if you haven't before. It's really, really good stuff. It's some of the only YouTube videos I watch, at least, that are educational.
It's not as entertaining, a little dense sometimes, but that's just my style.
Oh man. Well, so I'll unpack that a little bit more. And then you mentioned a little bit on how you use the buyback principles to write the book. And I will circle back to that a little later in the interview. What was your why now? I talk about, in my book, it's like you need a why that you're writing the book, and then you need a why now. And I know just from being a friend of yours, like we've talked, I've been nudging you for years. You've been talking about,
dude, you've shared so much. I've literally bought everything Chandler's got, and it is just funny. Like, a book was always in the the plan, but I think why now was, I'm at a place in my life where more and more of my day is about creation, and I like the challenges of new creative forms. When I started coaching, coaching was kind of a new art form. I invested in 50 plus companies and advised hundreds of companies. So I had kind of a coaching structure, but for the most part, it wasn't like really performance based and like mindset. So like even starting coaching was a way for me to build a skill set that I thought would be really valuable as I continued to build the empire, which I talk about in the book. Build your empire is a subtitle. And then for the book process was just like, I've been writing down that I am a prolific writer in my 5-minute journal. I literally, shout out to Alex and the team there, 5-minute journal. Cause I like to set the intention around identity way before, I'm a triathlete, I'm an Ironman athlete. Like these are things I wrote down for years prior to actually ever doing my first full Ironman. So yeah, I've been, fans of some of the greatest prolific authors. And I knew someday when the timing right, I would start that journey. And that's the beginning. And I do plan on writing dozens of books in my career to support the entrepreneurial journey and personal development and leadership, and really just like codify the things that I've learned that I know are battle tested, that work in the current world, that founders, give me feedback that say, oh, that's a unique perspective. I'd love for you to unpack that more. And I think that's the power of a book.
That's great. So shifting more into creation mode. And then it sounds like you partnered with Ron and his agent. What how'd you get the book deal? Any big lessons learned or takeaways from that process?
Yeah, and I'm an open book, right? So pun intended.
Just that pun,
not intended, but totally we're gonna leave that there. Yeah. Yeah. So lessons learned there. It seems like in today's market, I did a traditional publishing deal with Penguin Random House portfolio as an imprint. Even that, like, what is an imprint? I'm still confused, but finally figured this out after 2 years. But so lessons learned. A lot of these traditional publishers are looking for built-in audiences. I think the deal I got, which I'm not sure if I'm not allowed to say because how it works, but it was a multi-six-figure advance for a first-time author. But I mean, when you look at the book proposal and just the marketing section, the size of my email list and social media presence and all that stuff, like, whatever risk profile that they look at, it was a no-brainer. And honestly, I met with several of them. Lucinda, my agent, did an incredible job of, really creating that interest and demand. And I had super fun conversations with a bunch of different publishers, from like Wiley to HarperCollins, like you name them. I talked to them, which was really fun. But I guess I'm just a natural like person that gets, enthusiastic about my projects. And like, I don't know where it is. Oh, just one sec. So I need to explain this, but this is probably all wrinkly, but this is a fake vision. This is like a vision board of the book. Okay. So it's the New York Times homepage, made up. Canadian author, revolutionary concept managing. My buddy Martell, actually, full shout out to Martell, gave me this 2 years ago. Okay. And I've been staring at this thing in my desk. I just had it out because I actually shot a video for the sales team at Penguin. Because I was like, guys, this is why it's going to be a success. So I've been visualizing best-selling book, everything for 2 years. So when I was doing these calls, I was literally saying, look, yes, I have the audience. Yes, I think the content is going to be absolutely amazing, and the stories and all that stuff. But here's why. Like, this is the why, right? Like, I have people that see in me stuff I don't sometimes see in myself. And I've been staring at this thing, and I pull this up and I go, if you think I'm going to do anything less than be a wild success because my friends actually called it out and created this for, like, that's a fake page. He worked with a copywriter. Dude, bald face is in there. Probably didn't see that from the bottom. Here, little picture of the group.
Yeah. I'm
the
drinking
cat.
from my bald face mug over here. This is like my,
yeah.
my favorite one.
Chandler and I go on this epic trip every year. So yeah, that was like the thing that I think really got all the publishers. They were like, okay, this guy's a little intense, and he seems like he's going to make this happen, because they're taking a risk on the person. I mean, at the end of the day, they're not going to allow a bad book to go out. They're going to have their creative comments, but can the author do what they say they're going to do in the proposal? And I think everybody said resounding yes, created a bidding process, and then went with the publisher we felt aligned with kind of our needs and what we were trying to accomplish.
Got it. That's awesome. Super small question, just to backtrack for the audience. Imprint. You said you finally learned what an imprint is. What is it as you understand it?
My understanding is it's almost like a subcategory division of publishers that work on specific types of book that have a specific economic structure. Because you can have an imprint that's maybe, call it a hybrid within a Penguin Random House, but and they might focus on business book or personal development or whatever, but they're separate. Like Penguin may have a different imprint that does things differently. And it's just a different group of people that have it's kind of like a fund in investing, right? Different funds have different theses, but they're owned by the major investors. So yeah, that's the way I think about it.
That's great. And helpful for people who are thinking about going to get a book deal. I feel like it, so, a couple more questions on the methodology of getting to where you've kind of gotten to today. And then I want to unpack the principle of the book within the book, and within your life a little bit more. What, I want to say you worked with a ghostwriter or two in the past, had a not so great experience, restarted, kind of all that. People come to me all the time, Dan, and they're like, but come on, Chandler, like, I just want to hire one of your ghostwriters.
You know where all
like,
the skeletons are. Yeah.
Chandler's
Chandler's
like,
on the receiving end of these emails. Yeah.
And then I feel like a year later, it's like, oh man, yeah, maybe not. And so I just love to hear your experience and any lessons learned for that person who's like, I've got to hire a ghostwriter. I want to buy back my time. What did you learn? Where did you land?
Yeah. I'll tell you the quick backstory. The original attempt to writing a book was probably 5 years. I literally thought if I would just wake up and write for 4 hours a day for a month, I'd have a book. That was stupid. After 3 days, I realized like, wow, this doesn't make sense. I didn't even have a book outline. I would just like start and write and figure I'll edit it into something cohesive. And that was more of a software growth book. And then so shelved that. That was like when I first reached out to you and, and others, and they were like, oh, well, you got to start with an outline. And then you should probably, like grab all the content or like read, like talk it out loud. You can even do a presentation and transcribe it and then edit it. And then, so I tried that didn't work. And again, it was just the time I started looking at it and going like, whoa, this is a big time commitment. And then I hired, one of these, people that will get you a book written, right? So I'm not going to call them out. They're amazing, but at the end of the day, everybody's experience is different. And this is probably the lesson that they should have pushed back. I literally bought 2 books at the same time. I said, I'm going to do a software growth book and I'm going to do a business growth book. And they're like, yeah, no problem. 25 or 30 grand each. And I'm like, here you go. Wire them the money. Dude, I got the first, so I did all the interviews. It was like 12 or 15 hours of interviews, and then more hours to do the outline. And when I got the first draft of it, my like heart sank. I was like, they added details that are just not true. They took too much creative freedom. They didn't transcribe and edit. It felt like they just listened and then wrote from their perspective and point of view. And it didn't sound like me. And it was just like when they were like, yeah, no, this is normal. Like, sit down and just like take a first pass at reading this. And I'm like, okay, so now I got to spend 8 hours reading my own book, which, I already like, that's not fun. Reading is hard for me. I have crazy ADHD. So it's like, it needs to be really compelling. I'm like, it was super not compelling because I'm reading it and the whole time I'm like judging myself, judging the words. And eventually, and I tried, I literally was like, I did a first pass. I gave them notes. They actually hired a different writer to go through my interviews and give me another version from a technical writer that maybe understood the content more, because that was a software growth book. And I got it back. And again, same response, heart sank, like, just because there's something about a book that feels so permanent versus a video. I can delete a video where I said something stupid on YouTube. Once the book's out, it's out. And like, that was the thing where I was running with my buddy Jarrett, my videographer. And he's an artist, he's a creator. And he goes, dude, if you're not feeling it, man, you shouldn't put that art out to the world. And I kiboshed it. So I swallowed the cost, just shut it down, let them keep the money. I obviously got a refund on the second book we didn't start. But to do 2 books in 1 year, they should have said, hey, that's kind of stupid. But you know me, I'm like, hey, I want to do stuff that most people don't. And then, so I had this like PTSD from those 2 false starts. So when I started the third one, that's why it required a whole different approach. And that's where Ron's feedback to me, like, hey, he just wanted me to write a book. And then it was like, you need to be the driver of this. Like, I literally am talent in this relationship. He's the driver. And then we had Lisa write the book proposal, but then she got busy on another project, so she couldn't work with us on the book. Had a false start with the writer, just process, right? Like, just, I think we had a great outline, and then we started writing and we got the first 3 chapters. And I was just like, yeah, this is not my voice. There's some core concepts missing, and I could just project if I spent more time with the writer that it would continue. And even like the book outline, I did the outline, then had my videographer, one of my other ones, Sam, go through all my catalog of videos, clip and put in, transcribe. So the book is Dan. There's no, like, there's a ghostwriter in the sense of like more of an editor, but it's my content. And even at that, it didn't land. So I just went back to my team, to Ron and Lucinda, and said, hey, can we find another writer? We interviewed 3. I literally used my recruiting process, because originally they just found the writer, which is great. And it's so funny because like a lot of these people will say, like, I worked on this book and this book and this book. And then I like the second iteration of hiring a writer, I like called referrals, like, of people I knew. And I'd be like, did they write this book? They're like, no, they edited the book. Oh, like, and or like
I
they
worked
edited
on this book.
Yeah, they edited the non a version that didn't have swear words or something, like, like it is very loosey goosey, or they were like not the primary writer or secondary writer, and they would just take credit for stuff. And so I learned that. And then finally what I did is I forced an agile writing process. And that's just me, because I also know that I will write dozens of books, and I need to create a rhythm that will sustain the way I create long term. So I was willing to push back, and trust me, the team was like, this is not how books are written. Usually they're like, we sit down, we do all the stuff, and then we write the book, and then you get it back. And I'm like, no, we're going to spend time on each chapter, and we're going to put all the stories and the through lines and the research and all that stuff. And we're going to work on one chapter at a time. So the way the rhythm worked was 2-week rhythm. We did interviews on the videos that was transcribed so that they could fill in the blanks. They would write that week. The next week I would get the previous 2 weeks work. I would take that, edit it, mark it up. Then I would have a call with them at the end of the week to give them feedback on the edited version. The next week we would start over on the next chapter. And that was the agile rhythm. So essentially we were producing a chapter every 2 weeks that was that could not stray too far from what I wanted, because it was me. It was my transcriptions. It was filling in the blanks. It was adding the nuance. And then there was to-do lists for my writer and the researcher to go out and get additional stuff. Because the way I told Paul, my writer, who's awesome, is I want a third of the stories, our stories, a third of the stories, or my stories, a third of our stories, client stories, and then a third of stories, research stories, like pull in external frameworks. One of the things I did that I think your listeners would appreciate is that because I've highlighted every Kindle, like I read on my Kindle. So I buy physical books. I've read over 1,500 books. I buy the Kindle and I buy the physical book to put in my libraries. I have like 3 libraries in my house. But I had all the highlights in Kindle, and I had a programmer, because I couldn't find a tool that actually did it the way I wanted, to extract all my highlights. And then I would, for each chapter, and that was some homework I did, which was go through the things I was talking about and find quotes of people that have written books that I appreciate and reference them. Now that helped in a lot of ways. It helped with getting blurbs for my book. I would reference people that I wanted to reach out to for blurbs. It helped with building an influencer list. Yeah. It made sure that the quotes were like really meaningful to me, because everybody's going to resonate with different sets of words based on who they are. And it was super authentic. So it was fun as I would get these chapters back, I would just get super excited, because it was more aligned with what I wanted to do. And you told me this. I remember you were like, hey, Dan, like talk it out, edit it. Like you said, talk it, transcribe it, edit it, the whole strategy you guys teach. I'm assuming it's still part of the process. I just wanted to figure out how could I skip that. So the way I did it is I did talk it out. It's just I already captured the video because of the world I'm in. And then my writer did the editing part first pass. I got it. And it was just a manageable chunk. And essentially, I think there might've been 15. We're down to like 13 chapters because the book kept going like this to finally this. But yeah, it was about 2 weeks per chapter, and it was and it hit, like, by the time the whole book came together, it was like, wow, okay, I'm really proud of this piece of work.
Man, that's a good feeling. What a good feeling, especially after that journey.
I was so scared.
Yeah. It's like, I'm not restarting this process again. I love the thing you talked on piecing together highlights. And I think, so, I think that's such a great process to include truly meaningful quotes, like you said, versus a lot of times it's just like, what are the quotes that I've heard recently as I'm writing this book? There's a huge recency bias in what actually gets clicked in. It's what's capturing your attention during that 6-month creative process. I think that's a really, really cool process. Let's switch gears a little bit. You talked about this in the beginning and of the principles of buying back your time and how you use that with the book. And then I think we talked about ghostwriting stuff, which I think for a lot of people would be oh, let me just skip to the punchline, buy back your time, but pay a ghostwriter $30,000. It's like, that didn't work, created a new process. Instead, buying back your time by creating that process that you think you'll be able to use to do dozens of books. Can you maybe unpack the concept a little bit further? And what are other ways that you've used the concept of the book throughout the creation and marketing process?
Yeah. So the buyback loop, which is the core framework, which is audit, transfer, fill, right? So like, no matter what you're working on, your business, your life, a book, if you're looking to buy back your time, you got to audit your calendar to figure out where you're actually allocating time on the book. In my case, transfer it. So like, what would need to be true for somebody else to take this piece over, and then fill it. Like, if I give up that time, what am I going to add to it? Because I think a lot of people got inspired by the 4-hour work week, but you and I, and this is what I love about you, Chandler, is we're both like empire builders. Like, we will buy back our time, but not to go sit on a beach. We actually like are looking to create more value and learn and develop, and putting ourselves in those positions. So really it was like, how do I fill my time with things that are going to make the book even more successful, that are unique to my abilities, right? So that's the audit, transfer, fill, buyback loop, and it never stopped. So as the book kind of developed, I would say, bringing my writer Paul into the conversations directly with my publisher. So like, really giving them direct access and setting the parameters for what needs to be true for those outcomes to be positive. I brought in a copywriter. So I brought in my copywriter, Chris Ragutis. Shout out to Chris. He was, he's been working with me for a while, so he understood my tone very well. And because of the business I'm in, we actually have a documented, like, here's how to talk like Dan. But it turns out how I talk and write emails is not how you should write a book. So there's a little give and take there in regards to how you flesh out ideas and communicate. So Chris spent 5 days editing the book at the very end to add some punch to it, to really crystallize, the way I say things, and get all the proses and like the minutia. So like, having him available, investing in that. Then it was art, so like bringing in, I worked with this guy, Simon Bowen, who's one of the best model designers in the world. And he doesn't do books. It was just like he teaches businesses how to use models to sell. And I was like, Simon, I need you to like look at the book and work with me to design models per chapter so that it's absolutely visual, that connects to the content. So that was really fun. So bought back some time there. Rich, my designer. So I brought in Rich, and kind of, you guys want to see, I'm going to pull something up. So this is how crazy I am. Okay. So like, just on cover design, this is a bag full of book jackets. Okay. So like, not only did I like analyze, I went into books, like this is just a small pile of book jackets. Okay. From all the top books. I'm just going to throw this all over my desk. Okay. That part is Dan's creativity. Like, asking Betty, who's our house manager, to like go get all these books or take them off my shelves, bring them into my office. And then I sit there and I like nerd out on this. And I'm like, oh, there's Cameron's book, Double Double. And, the magic of thinking big, and McAllowitz's, clock, and just like really like analyzing the, like how they did the layout. But then, giving that feedback to Rich, my designer, and letting him work with the publisher to design the book jacket cover, the hardcover, and even the layout of the content inside, right? I'm always thinking about like, what is the thing that I love to do that creates the most value, but can I package it up in a way that somebody else can take it? Obviously they gotta be talented, but then run with it, right? So like, if anything, I'm really good at, this, I teach it in the book. It's called transformational leadership, which is clear outcomes, clear measurement, and coaching them to success. But sometimes why you buy back your time is to go invest in the skills to become like knowledgeable about something, jacket cover design, to then be able to lead another team to get an outcome for you. And that was a big part of it. And then we could dive into the promotion side, but I'm always analyzing my calendar, looking how I get stuff off my calendar, and then filling it up with stuff that's high value.
And so you said transformational leadership, you said clear outcomes. Was it clear metrics and then coaching them?
Yeah, I'll give you the short version. Most people lead through transactional leadership, which is tell them what to do. It's called the tell next check. Tell them what to do, or check that it got done. Tell them what to do next. Okay, so tell, next, check. Tell, check, next. That's transactional leadership. Transformational leadership is clear outcomes. So I don't tell people what to do. I tell them what it looks like when it's done. Then I say, here's the things I'm going to be measuring along the way so that you can't get off track. And then I'm going to meet with you on a frequency and review the output and coach you towards a better outcome. Right. And I have a whole framework for how to do the coaching. But think about writing a book. It's like, okay, Paul, we're writing a best-selling book. That's the outcome. Like the thing is going to sit between E-Myth and 4-Hour Work Week. Like I was very visual. It's going to be referenced like good to great. Like I was very clear on the intention, the motion, the focus of what we're trying to do here. Okay. So as you're writing, you got to understand this is what we're doing. This isn't just a project for you. This is a movement. Okay. That's the outcome. Measure is how many words per week are we producing towards that goal, right? Pretty straightforward. We might even do, another measurement I gave him is like grade 3 level English, because somebody said that. And it's true. It's funny because I read my friends' books that are a little heavy, kind of like a university style writing. And I'm like, ooh, I could see how a lot of people would not resonate with these big words. So like, again, that's another measurement. It needs to be this, it needs to be this, it needs to be this. And then coaching success, that was the rhythm we created, where we met every week, right, on the current chapter. And then the next week on the feedback from the last, or the new chapter, last chapter. And that's where I would coach. And I would say, you know how you wrote this? Okay, this is what you're missing. This, and this. It's a punch. Every ending of a chapter and every end of a section has to end with a recap punch. And I would give them examples. And that was the coaching side. And that allows you, what happens with transformational leadership is that you then build a team underneath you that can produce, right? Most people spend very little time, and I can prove it just by looking at their calendar, actually developing their people. They manage projects, but they have no time in their calendar to actually develop and train their team. And at the end of the day, you're only going to grow to the level of your team, and they're only going to grow to the level of where you're at. And you got to train them if they're on your team.
That's great. And what does that look like in your calendar? Is that one-on-ones? Is that something different? Like what's the time in your calendar where it's, oh, that's developing the team?
There's a lot. So I do, because most people get stuck most people can't grow past 300K because they don't know how to delegate. You can be a great doctor, but if you don't know how to delegate, you're going to just be a high paid doctor specialist. Then the next level of ceiling is about 2 million, because you got to learn how to delegate, and you can probably get to 2 million, but that's where the pain line kicks in and your life sucks. And you're like, I'm making less money working twice as much, and I just don't want to do this. The skill to learn at that level, which is most people that struggle, is learning to work through people. Right. So the mistake is actually to take all of this on. So what I do is I focus on my direct reports. Nobody should have more than 5 to 7 direct reports. One of my investors with Travis from Uber, Travis Kalanick, obviously negative sentiment in the market today, but at the time, incredible person to learn from. And he said it to me because they grew to 4,000 employees in 4 years. And I was like, how did you hire 4,000 people in 4 years? And he goes, I only have 5 people that report to me, and my job is to wake up and make sure that they have more bandwidth. So to the degree that I want to do more, I need to make sure they have more. So I have to develop them, or I got to find somebody else that has the capabilities to create more bandwidth so that we can get more done. So this concept of management bandwidth is a big one, right?
Yeah.
So I focus on those 5, but I'm also the CEO. So we do senior leadership training. So we have executive leadership team. Those are my direct reports. Then we have senior leadership team. Those are their direct team leads, essentially. And then we have individual contributors, and you can have multiple layers, but that usually breaks down for most companies pretty clearly. And I'll do definitely one-on-ones every 2 weeks with my team for an hour. It's all written down in a process. We're big on feedback. I teach it in the book. There's a whole chapter on leadership in my book, because I realized that if you just hire people and you don't understand how to lead properly, you're just going to get frustrated and fire them. And then the whole cycle keeps going. So my publisher actually said, like, this is a book. We actually had about 13 frameworks, and he's like, that's a book. Let's keep the top 3. And so that might be something I do in the future, which is actually a byproduct. I don't know, Chandler, if most of your clients realize this, but a lot of times when you write a book, you're identifying number 2 and 3 as part of that process.
Oh, big time.
So I definitely have that.
Yeah. Hey, I'll jump in here real quick. Or did you want to finish that thought?
I would just say I coach my direct reports. I do senior leadership training around the people side of things, mission, vision, values, time management. And then my COO manages more of the like operational OKR type stuff. And then I do CEO office hours, where it looks like Q&A, but it's really a way for me to install values and mission and principles into individual contributors. And that's a great rhythm.
Cool. That's great. And OKR, for those who aren't familiar, objective key results, Google kind of principle metrics that matter. I think John Doerr, maybe.
Yeah, John Doerr, Measure What Matters. Great book.
So
And yeah, great framework too.
I've got a bajillion more questions than I've got time, so I'll just ask one or two more as we wrap up here. You are really great. You've mentioned frameworks multiple times, and I feel like one of your superpowers is creating great frameworks to make meaningful content. It's something that when I did the second edition of this book, I'm like, how do I channel my inner Dan Martell and make frameworks to where this is not just helpful, but it's memorable. And so can you maybe unpack, how do you do that, or what's a framework for authors who want to do that to make their book more memorable?
Yeah, I think what I learned a long time ago is, in the information consulting services world, your product is your methodology. So think of like Anderson Consulting, Bain, and many others. The thing they sell is the process that is unique to them, that people look and go, oh, you have a unique opinion and a thing on how to solve churn, customer retention, or growth, or competitive analysis, or whatever it is, right? So like, as a software guy, I was designing software, which is architectures and database design. So like, visual modeling was just part of what I did. And I didn't realize doing that for 15 years taught me this skill set that just happens to be really valuable when you're teaching and coaching. Specifically, the way I design models is Simon Bowen really taught. There was like the Dan before meeting Simon, and then there's the Dan after Simon. So it's kind of like full credit to Simon, because I would just draw models without understanding the connection and correlation between different geometry and words and dimensions, where he gave me that new kind of upgrade. But the way I do it, I was doing it this morning. I've got an event coming up, and I wanted to teach a new framework. And I'll just show it to you. But essentially, I just write down a bunch of words. It's not finished, but I just write down. It doesn't even matter what's on there, but I just write down a bunch of stuff. And this is about competition. And this is like literally 7 minutes of me just jotting stuff down. But I write down the words to explain the concept. And I always want to think about like, what should they avoid and what should they look for? And then I figure out, based on it, like, and even in that template I created for myself has different geometries, right? Triangles, circles, squares, quadrants. And then as I look through the words, I'll like try to figure out, what is the natural, like, what am I talking about here? And there's process models. We can get nerdy about this. I mean, there's not enough time. We could literally spend 5 days on just designing models, but that's the way I do it. I just write stuff down and think, like, I use it as a cue to tell a story and a point. I think about what is the unique perspective I have around this thing, positive and negative. And if I have 4 points, then obviously probably a quadrant. If I have 3, it's probably a Venn diagram. If I have more, like 12 or 15, I might use a Venn diagram with what Simon calls a genius model. And it's an art form, and I absolutely love it. And it's something that, definitely is in the book, and definitely something that I think is worth developing, because when you give somebody a model and you name it, and I always joke, you have to underline it. Even there, I like underlined the top word. You give them a handle, and it's now a thing that, and this is my test for a model, is if I teach it to you, will you be able to share it to somebody else? So the buyback loop is audit, transfer, fill. It's a loop, and it never stops. It keeps going. And to the degree you get good at auditing, transferring, and filling your calendar, you will grow and unlock new levels of productivity and revenue, honestly. So yeah, my philosophy is like, is it memorable? Did I name it properly? Did I give it the right dimension? Did I use the right shape? And that's my test, is if in a week I teach it to your audience and I say, hey, do you remember the model for the buyback loop? And they go, yeah, it's blah, blah, blah. They can say those 3 things. I'm like, nailed it.
That's great. That's really great. And even just, looking at my notes from this interview, I feel like 2 of the things that I jotted down out of a handful of bullets is the buyback loop, and then transformational versus transactional leadership, which I can only assume that those are 2 key frameworks
They're in the book.
In the book. Yeah. Well, hey, parting question for you, Dan. Knowing what you know now, and then we'll talk about where can people go buy the book, all that good stuff. Knowing what you know now, what would be your parting piece of advice for the Dan from years ago before writing this book, or the other Dans out there who are thinking about writing their first book, and maybe successful entrepreneur, like, do I have the time? How can I buy back my time? All that stuff.
Yeah, I think there's a whole debate between traditional versus self-published. For a lot of reasons, for where I'm at in my career, traditional made sense because I got an advance that would cover all of the production costs and the core marketing costs. Definitely doesn't cover my time. Like this is the thing that I've been kind of playing this dance with my publisher where they're like, we want you to do this. And I go, that makes zero sense, right? Like even, reaching out to friends to do bulk orders, like what I'm offering to do the bulk order is not an in-person keynote because it just doesn't correlate to kind of where I'm at in kind of the buyback rate, and that's another concept in the book that, once you understand what your time's worth, it makes it really easy to make decisions. But I would just say, for especially people that don't have an audience, I got lucky that the process of building a coaching business and the marketing behind that created an audience that now I'm able to launch a successful book project. So I would say, if anybody is aspiring to write a book and you don't have an email list, and I have one of my best friends right now is finishing up his book and he has zero audience online. And luckily he's got friends like me that are willing to push it, which is another thing. Like, hey, build those relationships. Cause that's, another thing. I just got lucky. It's who I am. Me, like I'm a social dude. So I can now call in on those favors. But yeah, I would just say, think about the distribution because that is the hardest part of the book, writing it, finding a ghostwriter. It actually seems to be, maybe it's just my circle of friends, but it seems to be easier and easier to find folks. Don't double everything you estimate. It's almost like writing software. Like whatever you think time-wise it's going to take, just double it. Probably cost and personal time as well. But don't, at the end of the day, fall in love with the process, not the outcome. And for me, the process, knowing that I'm going to write dozens of books and investing in upfront and building this rhythm and building my team to be able to do next one in half the time and the one after that in a third of the time and double the quality, it's just worth it.
Yeah. That's great, man. That's awesome. Well, I can't wait to freaking read this book. It's not out yet, so I don't have a copy. But Dan, where can
it'll be out
go?
when this goes live, though?
Yes,
right?
yes. Sorry.
Perfect.
If you're listening to this right now or watching this, the book is out, which is a perfect segue. Dan, where can people go to buy the book?
Go to buybackyourtime.com. That'll redirect you to different retailers. And if you buy the book through the retailer and then come back to me and email me your receipt, there's a whole bunch of cool stuff I'm doing for readers. But yeah, buybackyourtime.com. And it'll be on all the, the Amazons and others, but I prefer people come to my site so we can start a relationship. And I can give you there's a whole level of stuff that didn't make the book because we, had to reduce it from 120,000 words down to 50 that I think some people would really enjoy getting.
Well, guys, buybackyourtime.com. Grab a copy of the book. It's everything that Dan creates is meaningful and extremely helpful. And I've been listening to and learning from this guy for a long time, both in person, from his YouTube videos, from his content. So this is gonna be an awesome book. Dan, you're the man. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Chandler. Appreciate it.